The hall was buzzing with quiet chatter. People had taken their seats, their eyes flicking toward the grand piano that sat under the soft golden lights. It was one of those evenings where the air felt heavy with expectation. Everyone was dressed neatly, as though they were preparing for something important. The smell of polished wood mixed with a faint scent of flowers arranged at the side of the stage. On the small steps leading up to the piano, a young woman hesitated, her fingers brushing lightly over the keys. She was nervous, almost trembling, but no one could tell from the calm expression she tried to wear. For a moment, she closed her eyes and took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She had been practicing for this day for months, but now, standing in front of an audience, the nerves threatened to swallow her confidence. It wasn't that she doubted her skill. The truth was, she had always been capable, but performing in front of strangers, people whose eyes could judge, whose whispers could linger long after the music stopped, felt like walking on a tightrope. A murmur ran through the room as the judge, a well-known pianist who had seen countless performances, leaned back in his chair. He was relaxed, almost casual as he glanced at her. "Play a simple tune," he said, his voice calm but carrying a hint of amusement. From his expression, it was clear he did not expect anything extraordinary. Most of the audience nodded, agreeing silently with his subtle smirk. They assumed this would be just another performance, a soft, pleasant melody that would fill the room for a few minutes and then be forgotten. The young woman's stomach tightened, but she nodded slightly and moved her fingers over the piano keys. She could feel the smoothness of the ivory beneath her fingertips, a familiar sensation that usually brought comfort. Today, though, it was different. Today, the keys felt heavier, as if they carried the weight of every expectation in the room. She remembered all the times she had practiced alone, late into the night, her music echoing in an empty room, her emotions pouring into each note with no audience to watch. Those private moments had been safe, pure, unpressured. But here, under the lights and the gaze of so many people, it was different. She began softly, as though testing the waters, her fingers playing the melody that had been requested. The audience settled in, some nodding politely, others whispering to their companions about the simplicity of what they were hearing. It was a delicate tune, easy to follow, nothing that would demand too much attention. She felt a flicker of doubt. Was this all they wanted from her? Was she just meant to play something safe, something ordinary? But then, something inside her shifted. She remembered why she loved the piano in the first place. It was not about pleasing others or meeting expectations. It was about the music, about letting her feelings speak through the keys. She straightened in her seat, lifted her chin slightly, and allowed herself to let go. What came next was not planned. Her fingers moved almost on their own, carrying a melody far more intricate than the simple tune requested. The notes flowed like water, smooth in some places, rushing in others, weaving a story that was completely her own. She could feel every emotion, every fear, every hope, every secret joy, pouring into the music. Her heart beat in rhythm with the melody, and she forgot, for a moment, that anyone was watching. At first, the audience noticed the change as a subtle shift, a delicate rise in complexity, a richness that was unexpected. Then, slowly, their murmurs died down. The casual smirks faded, replaced by attentive silence. Some leaned forward in their seats, eyes fixed on her hands, trying to understand how a performance that began so simply could grow into something so breathtaking. The judge's brow furrowed slightly, and he leaned forward, resting his chin in his hand. He had seen many talented performers, but this was different. This was raw, unpolished, yet incredibly moving. She did not notice the changing expressions. She only heard the music, felt it resonate inside her chest, vibrating through every part of her. Each note told a story she had never been able to say in words. There was a sadness, a longing, a hope that she carried deep inside her. And for the first time, she let it flow freely. The melody rose and fell, soft and gentle one moment, strong and commanding the next. She felt like she was speaking directly to each person in the room, without words, without explanation. The music itself was her voice. Time seemed to slow down. Minutes passed, but it felt like hours. Every movement of her hands was deliberate yet natural, effortless yet powerful. She could see a few people wiping their eyes, holding their breath, unable to look away. Others sat frozen, completely captivated, as though the sound had wrapped around them and would not let them go. Even the judge, who had been critical and often unflinching, seemed caught off guard. He shifted in his seat, unsure of how to respond, his usual confidence replaced by quiet astonishment. There was a moment when she nearly stopped. Her fingers hovered above the keys, a question lingering in her mind. Should she hold back, play something safe, return to the simple tune as requested? But she shook her head, smiling slightly to herself. No, this was her moment. This was not about what anyone expected. It was about what she needed to express. She pressed down on the keys again, louder this time with conviction. The hall seemed to vibrate with the music, each note striking a chord in the hearts of those listening. People began to lean forward instinctively, caught up in the emotion of the performance. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, recalling memories, dreams, or moments they had long forgotten. There was laughter hidden in the melody, tears hidden in the rhythm, and an honesty that could not be ignored. She felt the energy of the room, feeding back into her performance, pushing her to play with even more passion. And then, just as suddenly as it had begun, the piece reached its final note. Her hands lingered over the keys for a heartbeat longer, savoring the silence that followed. The room was still for a moment, not a sound, as if everyone were suspended in time, unsure how to respond. And then applause. It began softly, hesitant, but quickly grew louder and louder, filling the hall with cheers, clapping, and shouts of admiration. She allowed herself a small smile, a mix of relief and joy. Her heart was pounding, her palms slightly sweaty, but she had done it. She had played not what they expected, but what she needed to play. And in that moment, she realized something important. Music was not about approval. It was about honesty, about bravery, about letting the world hear the truth of who you are. As she rose from the piano, the judge stood up as well, clapping slowly, his usual reserve replaced by genuine respect. He nodded at her, a small but meaningful gesture, acknowledging the talent he had almost overlooked. The audience continued to cheer, some standing now, unable to contain their admiration. She felt a warmth in her chest, a quiet pride that was different from anything she had ever felt before. This was the first step in a journey she had only begun to imagine, a moment that would shape the rest of her life. Backstage, she exhaled slowly, letting the tension leave her body. Her fingers still tingled from the intensity of the performance. She thought of all the nights spent practicing alone, the countless hours of dedication, the doubts and fears she had carried. And now all of it had led to this. A moment where her music spoke louder than her nerves, louder than anyone's expectations, louder than the fear of judgment. Even though the night was not over, even though there would be more performances, more opportunities, more challenges, she knew that nothing could take away what had happened here. She had shown not just talent, but courage, and in doing so, she had touched the hearts of everyone who had listened. And that, she realized, was worth more than any applause, more than any recognition. The hall slowly emptied, leaving behind the soft glow of the stage lights and the lingering echo of the final notes. She looked at the piano one last time, a silent thank you passing through her mind. This instrument had been her companion, her voice, her sanctuary, and tonight, it had helped her tell a story that words alone could never have expressed. She walked away from the piano, her steps light, her heart full. She did not know exactly what the future held, but one thing was certain. She had found her voice, and she would never be afraid to let it be heard again. The moment the applause began to fade, a quiet tension replaced it in the hall. People were still whispering to each other, their faces alive with astonishment. No one had expected what they had just witnessed. The young woman had taken a simple request and transformed it into something extraordinary. Even the judge, who had years of experience and had seen countless performers, seemed unsure how to react. He leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on her, a thoughtful expression crossing his face. There was a pause in the room, a moment where everyone realized they had been part of something rare, something they might remember for a long time. She stepped away from the piano slowly, trying to let herself breathe again. Her legs felt a little weak, her fingers still tingling from the intensity of her performance. She could feel her heart racing, not just from the music but from the awareness that everything in the room had shifted. People were no longer casual observers. They were witnesses to a talent that was unexpected, raw, and full of emotion. She moved toward the side of the stage where a small group of organizers waited, their faces lit with excitement and curiosity. One of the organizers, a kind-looking woman, stepped forward with a clipboard in hand. "That was incredible," she said softly, almost reverently. "We didn't expect something like that. Are you ready to tell us about what you just played?" She shook her head with a small smile. "It's not really something I can explain," she said quietly. "It just came out. I let it happen." The woman nodded knowingly. "It felt like you were speaking to every person in the room, not just playing music. That's rare. Very rare." Meanwhile, in the audience, murmurs were spreading like wildfire. People were discussing the performance in hushed tones, each trying to describe what they had felt. Some said they had never experienced anything so moving. Others were amazed at the complexity of the composition, the way it seemed to tell a story without words. Every whisper, every reaction added to the sense that this was not just another performance. It was an event that would be remembered. The judge stood up slowly and clapped, his voice carrying through the room. "That was unexpected," he said. "Truly unexpected. You have a gift. Do you understand how rare it is to take a simple tune and turn it into something so alive?" She looked down, feeling a mix of pride and humility. "I don't know about that," she replied softly. "I just played what I felt." He smiled faintly. "And that is exactly why it was extraordinary." He paused, then leaned closer. "Have you performed for anyone else? For larger audiences? Or is this the first time you've played like this in front of so many people?" She shook her head. "I've played for small groups, mostly family or friends, but nothing like this." The judge's eyes softened, and he nodded. "Well, it's clear that you have something very special. Don't underestimate it." She nodded in return, feeling the weight of his words. It was one thing for strangers to be impressed, but hearing a professional acknowledge her talent in this way felt different. It wasn't just validation. It was recognition that what she had done mattered beyond herself. Back in the hall, the other performers were preparing for their own pieces, but many of them found themselves distracted, unable to shake the memory of the performance they had just witnessed. Some glanced toward the piano, half expecting to see her play again. Others whispered quietly, comparing her to well-known pianists, trying to understand how someone so young and relatively unknown could deliver such power and emotion. Meanwhile, the young woman sat quietly in a small room behind the stage, waiting for the next announcement. Her hands rested in her lap, still tingling from the music. She thought about the judge's words, about the whispers in the hall, and about the way the audience had reacted. She realized that she had crossed a threshold. She had moved from being an observer in the world of music to being an active voice within it. Yet, despite the excitement, she couldn't ignore the nervous flutter in her stomach. What if people expected more now? What if she couldn't live up to this performance again? The thought made her pause, and she closed her eyes, trying to steady herself. She reminded herself that she had not planned the music, had not forced it. It had simply happened because she had allowed herself to feel and to express. Perhaps that was the lesson she needed to carry forward. That her music was strongest when it came from honesty, not expectation. After a few minutes, one of the organizers returned with a small smile. "They want to meet you," she said. "Some of the judges and sponsors would like to talk to you about future opportunities. Are you interested?" Her eyes widened slightly. She had always dreamed of performing on larger stages, of sharing her music with more people, but opportunities had been rare. Most doors had seemed closed, most invitations out of reach. And now, suddenly, it felt like a new world was opening before her. She nodded, a mix of excitement and nervousness fluttering through her. The hallway outside the small room was lined with people, each looking toward her with curiosity and admiration. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the smooth floor beneath her feet and the warmth of the lights above. One by one, people greeted her, congratulating her, asking questions about her training, her inspirations, and her plans for the future. She answered as best she could, careful to remain humble, even though inside she felt a quiet surge of pride. Among those who approached was the judge. He shook her hand firmly. "You have a rare gift," he said again. "I hope you understand the responsibility that comes with it. Talent like this doesn't just appear. It demands attention, care, and respect. If you nurture it, it could take you far beyond what you imagine." She nodded, trying to absorb every word. "I will," she replied quietly. "I promise I will do my best." The judge smiled faintly. "Good. That is all anyone can ask." As the night continued, she found herself invited to speak with several sponsors and music mentors, each interested in her future, each impressed by the performance they had witnessed. She realized that her life was shifting in ways she had never anticipated. Every conversation, every handshake, every word of encouragement felt like a small door opening, offering possibilities she had only dreamed of before. Later, when the hall had mostly emptied, she stood near the piano again, touching the keys lightly. The room was quiet now, except for the faint hum of lights and the soft creak of the wooden floor. She remembered the first moment she had touched these keys as a child, unsure and hesitant, and she thought of the journey that had brought her here. It had been filled with practice, with struggle, with doubt, but also with passion, with love for the music, and with an unwavering belief in the power of her own voice. She played a few quiet notes, just for herself, letting the sound fill the empty hall. It felt different without the audience, but it was still powerful, still honest, still alive. She realized that this performance had been only the beginning, that there were countless compositions waiting inside her, stories she had yet to tell through her fingers, emotions she had yet to share with the world. As she left the hall that night, she felt a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration. Her mind was racing with thoughts of the future, of the opportunities that might come, and of the music that still lay ahead. But beneath all of it was a steady, quiet certainty. She had found a new sense of herself. She had discovered that her music could touch people, could move hearts, and could open doors she had never imagined. Walking through the quiet streets toward home, the night air cool against her skin, she replayed the performance in her mind. Every note, every pause, every rise and fall of the melody seemed to linger in the air around her, like a whisper that would never fade. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that this was only the start of something much greater than she had ever dreamed. The challenges, the expectations, the pressures, they would come, no doubt. But she now knew she had the strength to face them, the courage to let her music speak, and the talent to make people listen. That night, beneath the quiet stars and the soft glow of streetlights, she felt a spark of something new. Hope, possibility, and the quiet promise of a future shaped by her own hands and her own heart. She did not know exactly what would happen next, but she knew one thing for certain. The world had heard her, and she had heard herself, and that, more than applause, more than recognition, more than anything else, was worth everything she had worked for. The next morning, she woke up with a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The events of the previous night kept replaying in her mind like a vivid dream she couldn't shake. She remembered the soft murmur of the audience, the hush that fell over the hall when her music began to unfold, and the look on the judge's face, a mixture of surprise and admiration that had surprised her more than anything else. For months she had practiced in silence, playing for no one but herself, but suddenly, it felt as if the world had noticed her, and that was a new, almost overwhelming feeling. She spent the morning in quiet reflection. Her small apartment felt unusually bright as sunlight poured through the windows. She moved around slowly, making tea and watching the city wake up outside. Cars rumbled along the streets, and people hurried by on their way to work, oblivious to the quiet victories being made behind closed doors. She thought about the offers that had been mentioned, the invitations to meet sponsors and mentors, the possibility of performing on bigger stages. Each idea seemed exciting and frightening at the same time. When she finally sat at her piano, she felt a familiar thrill. Her fingers hovered above the keys as she thought about what she had played the night before. She wondered if she could capture that same energy again, that sense of freedom and emotion that had flowed so naturally in the hall. The music had been honest, raw, and entirely hers, and she feared that any attempt to replicate it might fall flat. But at the same time, she knew that her talent was real, and that it could not be hidden. It waited to be expressed, again and again, in ways she had not yet imagined. By mid-morning, a soft knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find one of the organizers from the hall standing there, holding a folder and a polite smile. "Good morning," the woman said warmly. "I hope you're feeling well. We have a few people who would like to meet you today. Some mentors and perhaps a few sponsors. Are you available?" Her heart skipped a beat. She nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. "Yes, I can do that." The organizer stepped inside, closing the door gently behind her. "Excellent. They were very impressed with your performance. Everyone agrees that your music is rare, and they want to see where it can go." She paused, glancing at the piano. "Do you play much in the morning? Or was last night a special occasion?" She smiled faintly. "I usually practice in the evenings, but the music doesn't really follow a schedule. Sometimes it comes at odd moments. Sometimes it comes when I least expect it." The organizer nodded knowingly. "That's a good way to think about it. Talent like yours isn't about routine. It's about honesty, and people can sense that." Within the hour, she found herself dressed neatly and stepping into a small, elegant room where several people were waiting. The space smelled faintly of coffee and polished wood, and soft sunlight fell across the room from the tall windows. She felt her hands tingle as she looked around. These were strangers, yet they were here because of her music, because of something she had done without even trying to impress anyone. Introductions were made. One by one, she shook hands, listening to their questions and comments. They were curious about her training, about the hours she had spent practicing, about the pieces she loved most. She answered as best she could, her voice quiet but confident. She could feel their attention, their genuine interest, and it made her feel seen in a way she had never experienced before. Then one of the mentors, an older musician with gentle eyes and a kind smile, leaned forward. "Your performance last night," he said softly, "was extraordinary. You didn't just play a tune. You told a story. You let your heart guide your hands. That's rare. Very rare." She looked down, a flush creeping across her cheeks. "I didn't plan it," she said quietly. "I just let it happen." He nodded, understanding. "And that is exactly why it was so powerful. Talent and honesty together create magic. Remember that. Never let someone take that away from you, or make you doubt it." The meeting continued for some time, filled with conversations about possibilities, advice, and encouragement. She learned about upcoming competitions, scholarships, and performance opportunities. Each suggestion made her pulse quicken. She realized that her life could change in ways she had barely imagined. But along with the excitement, a quiet fear lingered. What if she wasn't ready? What if the next performance didn't capture the same feeling? She left the meeting with her mind spinning. Outside, the city was alive and bustling, people moving through their routines, unaware of the journey she had just begun. She walked slowly, taking in the sights and sounds, feeling the weight of possibility pressing gently on her shoulders. She thought about the piano waiting for her back home, about the melodies that were still unplayed, and about the stories she had yet to tell. The next few days passed in a blur. She returned to the piano each evening, exploring new pieces and experimenting with melodies. She practiced old favorites, but she also let herself play freely, allowing emotion to guide her fingers. Sometimes she would play softly, almost whispering the notes, and other times with strength and intensity, as if she were speaking to the world through sound. She discovered that her music could change with her feelings, that it could be a reflection of her mood, her dreams, and her fears. One afternoon, a phone call changed everything. It was an invitation to perform at a special event, a small gathering of musicians and patrons who were known for recognizing new talent. She felt a thrill of excitement mixed with nerves. This was not a casual audience. These were people whose opinions could shape her future. She knew that performing in front of them would be a challenge, but it was also an opportunity to show what she was truly capable of. She spent the following days preparing, not by forcing herself to play perfectly, but by focusing on the emotion she wanted to convey. She experimented with different tempos, different rhythms, and different dynamics. She thought about the stories she wanted to tell through her music, about the feelings she wanted to evoke in her audience. Each session at the piano brought a new discovery, a new layer of understanding about her own abilities. Finally, the day of the performance arrived. She entered the room, her hands trembling slightly, but her mind focused. The audience was smaller than the hall from before, but more intimate, more intense. These were people who understood music deeply, who would notice every nuance and every detail. She felt their eyes on her, felt the energy of expectation surrounding her, and took a deep breath. She began to play softly, allowing the music to build naturally. The notes were gentle at first, almost like a conversation, and then they grew, filling the room with warmth and emotion. She felt the audience responding, leaning in, listening closely, caught in the unfolding story of the music. She played not to impress, not to meet expectations, but to share a piece of herself, to let the melody speak the words she could not. As she continued, she noticed subtle changes in the audience's expressions. Eyes widened, hands rested on chins, some tilted their heads, absorbing every sound. She felt a sense of connection, a quiet understanding that music had created a bridge between her and everyone in the room. This was more than performance. It was communication, emotion, and honesty all woven together in sound. When the final note faded, the room was silent for a heartbeat. Then, slowly, applause began, soft at first and then swelling into genuine, heartfelt admiration. She rose from the piano, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy flooding through her. The mentors and patrons approached, praising her performance, asking about her inspirations, and offering guidance for the future. She felt a quiet sense of purpose growing inside her. That night, walking home, she felt a new level of confidence. She realized that music was not just something she did. It was something she lived. It was her voice, her story, her way of connecting with the world. She thought about the path ahead, the challenges, the opportunities, the countless performances waiting to be played, and she felt ready. She had faced doubt, nervousness, and uncertainty, and she had come through with her honesty and her talent intact. She understood something important now. Music was not about perfection or about pleasing everyone. It was about truth. It was about courage. And when she played from her heart, the world could hear it. That realization gave her a calm strength, a quiet determination that would carry her forward through every challenge, every stage, and every audience she would encounter. As she prepared for sleep that night, she thought about the journey she had begun. From playing in a small hall with cautious expectations to meeting mentors and patrons who recognized her talent, she had taken steps into a new world. She knew that more challenges would come, more moments where nerves and doubt would rise, but she also knew that her music would guide her through. It would speak for her when words could not. It would connect her to others in ways that nothing else could, and it would remind her always of the power she carried inside. And with that thought, she drifted into a peaceful sleep, dreaming of melodies that had yet to be discovered, stories waiting to be told, and a future shaped not by fear, but by the courage to play her heart out, again and again. The day began with a quiet stillness. The streets were alive with the usual hum of morning traffic, people hurrying to work, street vendors calling out their wares, and the faint smell of freshly baked bread drifting from the corner bakery. But inside her small apartment, the world felt different. There was a sense of anticipation in the air, as if something important was about to happen. She could feel it in her chest, a fluttering mix of excitement and nervous energy. Today was not just another day of practice. It was another step into the world she had glimpsed only briefly before, a world that seemed bigger, brighter, and more alive than she had ever imagined. She sat at the piano, fingers brushing lightly over the keys. The memory of her last performance was still vivid, echoing in her mind like a gentle whisper. She could remember the way the audience had leaned forward, captivated, the hush that had fallen when she began to play, and the expressions of surprise and admiration that had crossed their faces. That performance had changed something inside her. It had reminded her that her music had power, that it could touch people in ways words never could, and that the world could hear her if she allowed herself to be brave. Today, however, there was a new challenge waiting. She had been invited to a private gathering, a small, exclusive event where several respected musicians and patrons would be in attendance. They had heard about her performance the night before and were curious to see more, to understand the depth of her talent. It was a smaller crowd, but no less intimidating. These were people whose opinions could influence her future, whose judgment could open doors or close them. She felt a mixture of fear and excitement as she prepared for the day, her hands resting lightly on the piano keys as she imagined what awaited her. When she arrived at the venue, she was greeted by the warm smiles of the organizers. The room was elegant and cozy, with soft lighting that highlighted the polished wooden floor and the grand piano at the center. A small group of people had already gathered, sipping tea and chatting quietly, their eyes curious and attentive. She took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling the smooth floor beneath her feet and the gentle weight of the moment pressing on her shoulders. As introductions were made, she listened carefully to the conversations around her. People spoke of music, of technique, of the nuances that made a performance memorable. She felt both nervous and inspired. These were experts, people who had dedicated their lives to understanding the beauty and complexity of music. And yet, despite her nerves, she felt a quiet confidence building inside her. She had faced large audiences before, and she had discovered that the key to a powerful performance was not perfection. It was honesty, emotion, and courage. When it was finally her turn to play, she moved to the piano and settled into her seat. Her fingers hovered above the keys, a moment of silence stretching between her and the audience. She closed her eyes briefly, taking a deep breath, and allowed herself to remember the feeling of music flowing naturally, without thought, without expectation. This was not a performance to impress. It was a conversation, a sharing of something deep and true. She began softly, a simple melody at first, gentle and unassuming. The audience listened attentively, their expressions calm but curious. Then, almost without warning, the music shifted. Her fingers moved with growing confidence, the melody unfolding into something richer, more intricate, more alive. Each note carried a story, a feeling, a piece of herself that she had never shared before. She could feel the energy of the room responding, the attentive silence pressing around her, and she let herself sink fully into the music. The notes rose and fell, soft in some moments, strong in others. She played with a sense of freedom, her emotions guiding every movement. There was a subtle tension in the air, an almost tangible feeling that something extraordinary was unfolding. The audience, initially reserved, began to lean forward, drawn in by the story her fingers were telling. Some closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, feeling memories, emotions, and dreams awakened by the sound. Others watched her hands closely, marveling at the skill, precision, and emotion she displayed with each note. As the piece continued, she felt herself becoming fully absorbed. The music was no longer just something she played. It was an extension of herself, a voice for emotions she could not otherwise express. She allowed the melody to rise and fall with her heart, to flow freely and unpredictably, to surprise even her own ears. Each chord, each pause, each subtle change in tempo carried meaning. She played not for recognition, not for applause, but for the simple, profound act of creating something beautiful and real. The room seemed to disappear around her. Time slowed, and she became aware only of the music and the connection it created. She could feel the energy of the audience flowing toward her, feeding her confidence, guiding her fingers. She played with a mixture of precision and abandon, technique and emotion, skill and intuition. It was as if the music itself had taken control, carrying her along on a journey she could barely anticipate but fully trusted. When the final note lingered and faded into silence, the room was quiet for a moment, suspended in awe. Then, gradually, the applause began. It started softly, tentative and polite, but quickly grew louder, stronger, and more heartfelt. People rose from their seats, clapping, smiling, and speaking in hushed tones of admiration. The feeling in the room was electric, a mix of respect, amazement, and wonder. She allowed herself a small, shy smile, feeling a quiet pride welling up inside her. Several of the mentors and patrons approached her afterward, their faces warm and encouraging. They spoke of her technique, her emotional depth, and the way her music seemed to speak directly to the listener. They asked about her inspirations, her training, and her plans for the future. She answered as honestly as she could, sharing the quiet dedication, the hours of practice, and the love of music that had brought her to this point. They listened with genuine interest, nodding, smiling, and offering advice. One mentor, an older musician with a calm, thoughtful presence, spoke directly to her. "You have a rare gift," he said. "Not only do you play beautifully, but you play with honesty. You share a piece of yourself every time your fingers touch the keys. That is what makes your music unforgettable. Never lose that." She nodded, her voice quiet. "I will try," she said. "I want to play in a way that feels real, that comes from the heart." He smiled. "And that is exactly what you did today." The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur of conversation, small performances, and introductions. She met other musicians, learned about their journeys, and felt a sense of belonging she had rarely experienced. Each encounter, each word of encouragement, added to the growing certainty that she was on the right path, that her music had value and meaning beyond her own understanding. By evening, she found herself alone with the piano once more. The room was quiet, lit softly by the fading light of the setting sun. She played a few gentle notes, exploring new melodies and rhythms, letting her imagination guide her fingers. The music was personal, intimate, a reflection of her own thoughts and feelings. She felt a sense of calm and clarity, as if the events of the day had opened her mind to new possibilities, new directions, and new dreams. As night fell, she walked home slowly, the streets quieting as the city settled into darkness. She thought about the day, about the people she had met, the reactions she had witnessed, and the way her music had connected with others. She realized that her journey was only beginning, that there were countless opportunities, challenges, and performances ahead. And yet she felt ready. She had discovered the power of her own voice, the courage to express herself, and the ability to touch others through her music. That night, as she prepared for sleep, she reflected on the lessons she had learned. Music was not about perfection or meeting expectations. It was about honesty, courage, and expression. It was about finding the right balance between skill and emotion, technique and heart. And when she played from that place of truth, the world could hear her, could feel her, and could be moved by her. She drifted into sleep with a sense of peace and anticipation. She dreamed of new melodies, new stories, and new stages. She dreamed of audiences captivated, mentors impressed, and doors opening to opportunities she had once only imagined. And beneath it all was the quiet certainty that she was ready for whatever came next, that her music would continue to guide her, and that her voice, honest and true, would always be heard. The morning light came gently through the windows, painting her small apartment in soft shades of gold. She sat at the piano, hands hovering over the keys, feeling the quiet hum of anticipation in her chest. The past days had been a whirlwind of experiences, performances, meetings, advice, and encouragement, but today felt different. Today, there was a new sense of responsibility pressing gently on her shoulders. She had discovered her talent, shown it to the world, and been met with admiration. But now she understood that admiration was only the beginning. True recognition came with the expectation of more, of continued growth, of deeper expression. She began to play softly, letting her fingers wander over the familiar keys. At first, the music was gentle, almost like a conversation with herself, exploring new patterns, testing new ideas. As the melody unfolded, she felt the familiar thrill of creation. The way music could carry her emotions, her thoughts, and her stories without a single word. She thought about the people who had watched her perform, their reactions, the way her music had touched them. It was humbling and inspiring all at once. She wanted to honor that trust, that attention, by pushing herself further, by exploring new depths of expression she had never dared before. The day passed quickly. She received phone calls from mentors, invitations to perform at small events, and even an offer to meet a well-known pianist who had heard about her from a friend. Each opportunity was exciting, but also intimidating. She felt the weight of expectations pressing on her, the quiet pressure to succeed, to prove that her talent was not a one-time occurrence. And yet, beneath all the nerves, there was a sense of determination. She had come this far. She had discovered a voice that was uniquely hers, and she knew that she could not hide it anymore. That evening, she traveled to a new venue, a cozy recital hall with polished wooden floors and walls that seemed to echo even the softest sounds. The room smelled faintly of flowers and old books, a comforting mix that reminded her of quiet afternoons spent practicing alone. The audience was small but distinguished, composed of musicians, critics, and enthusiasts who had heard whispers of her previous performances. She could feel their eyes on her as she stepped onto the stage, the subtle weight of expectation pressing gently against her shoulders. She approached the piano slowly, taking a deep breath before settling onto the bench. Her hands hovered over the keys, a moment of silence stretching between her and the audience. She could feel their curiosity, their anticipation, their subtle judgment, and she let it strengthen her resolve. She was not here to impress, she reminded herself. She was here to play honestly, to let the music speak for her. The first notes were soft, delicate, almost hesitant, as if testing the space around her. She allowed herself to feel the room, to sense the presence of the audience, to let that energy guide her fingers. Slowly, the melody began to grow, each note connecting to the next in a way that felt natural, effortless, yet profoundly expressive. The music flowed, carrying emotion, depth, and nuance, telling a story that only she could tell. As she played, she noticed subtle reactions in the audience. A few leaned forward, captivated by the unfolding melody. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them, their faces reflecting quiet emotion. Some smiled, some held their breath, caught in the ebb and flow of the performance. She felt a quiet thrill, knowing that her music had the power to touch people so deeply, that her honest expression could create connection, understanding, and even wonder. Time seemed to slow. Each note, each pause, each rise and fall of the melody carried meaning beyond the music itself. She was no longer aware of the audience, of the venue, or even of herself. She was fully immersed in the act of creation, in the delicate, intimate dialogue between her heart and the keys. Every emotion she had felt, the fears, the hopes, the joys, the doubts, found a place in the music. And every person listening was part of that journey, experiencing it with her in real time. When the final chord resonated and lingered in the air, there was a moment of silence so complete that it felt as though the world itself had paused. Then, slowly, applause began. It was soft at first, almost hesitant, but it grew steadily, filling the hall with warmth and energy. She allowed herself a small smile, a mixture of relief, pride, and joy. She had given everything she had to the music, and the response was both humbling and inspiring. After the performance, she was approached by several members of the audience. They spoke quietly, offering praise, asking questions, and sharing their impressions. One critic, who had been known for his sharp judgments, shook her hand and said, "Your music is not just skillful, it is alive, carries emotion and honesty in every note. That is rare." She nodded, feeling both pride and humility. She thanked him quietly, realizing that recognition was different from applause. It was acknowledgement that what she had shared mattered, that it had left a mark. A mentor approached, smiling warmly. "You are growing quickly," he said. "Every performance shows more depth, more understanding, more heart. You have the potential to go far, but remember to stay true to yourself. Never let fear or expectation guide your music. Let only honesty and passion guide your fingers." She nodded, feeling the weight of his advice and the truth in it. It was a reminder she would carry with her always. That music was not about perfection, competition, or approval. It was about expression, connection, and courage. And when she played from that place, she could reach people in ways words never could. As the evening ended, she walked home slowly, reflecting on the experiences of the day. The city was quieter now, the streets dimly lit by street lamps, the hum of distant traffic a gentle background to her thoughts. She replayed the performance in her mind, analyzing each movement, each note, each subtle shift in tempo. She felt a quiet satisfaction, a sense that she had grown, not just as a musician, but as a person willing to share herself honestly with the world. Back at her apartment, she sat at the piano again. The keys felt familiar, comforting, as if they understood her intentions without needing words. She allowed herself to play freely, exploring melodies that had come to her during the day, letting emotion guide her hands. There was no audience now, no judgment, no expectation, just her and the music. And in that quiet, intimate space, she felt a sense of peace, clarity, and purpose. The days that followed were filled with similar experiences. Invitations to perform, opportunities to meet mentors, and chances to explore her music in new ways began to accumulate. Each performance, each interaction, reinforced her growing understanding of herself as a musician and as a person. She discovered that her music had the power to inspire, to heal, and to connect people. She learned to trust her instincts, to let emotion guide her, and to embrace both success and vulnerability as part of the journey. One afternoon, she received an invitation to perform at a prestigious music festival. It was the first time she would be on a stage larger than any she had experienced, in front of an audience she could not even imagine. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She knew that this performance would be a defining moment, one that could shape the future of her career. She spent the following days preparing, not by forcing herself to play perfectly, but by exploring the music deeply, understanding its emotional nuances, and allowing her own feelings to guide her interpretation. When the day of the festival arrived, she felt a mix of nerves and determination. The hall was vast, filled with rows of seats that stretched far back, and the audience was a mix of experts, critics, and enthusiasts. The lights were brighter, the air heavier with expectation, but she reminded herself of the lessons she had learned. Play honestly, trust your instincts, and let the music speak for you. She approached the piano, settled onto the bench, and allowed herself a deep breath. The first notes were soft, almost a whisper, drawing the audience in. Slowly, the melody grew, expanding with emotion and complexity. She felt every chord, every rhythm, every pause as part of a story she was telling not with words, but with music. The audience listened, captivated, their reactions subtle but telling. The lean of a head, the closing of eyes, the gentle sighs that accompanied certain passages. As the piece reached its climax, the room seemed to hold its breath. She played with a freedom and power that surprised even herself, letting the music soar and then soften, creating a journey that mirrored her own experiences, struggles, and triumphs. When the final chord faded, the hall erupted in applause, stronger and more sustained than anything she had experienced before. She rose from the piano, overwhelmed by the magnitude of the moment, and allowed herself a small, humble smile. That night, walking home, she reflected on the journey she had undertaken. From hesitant beginnings to unexpected recognition, from small performances to large stages, she had grown not just as a musician, but as a person who understood the power of honesty, courage, and expression. She realized that this was only the beginning, that countless performances, experiences, and challenges awaited her. And yet, she felt ready. She had discovered her voice, and she knew that it could reach people, touch hearts, and leave a mark that would last. The day of the biggest performance of her life arrived quietly, without fanfare. She woke to the soft morning light spilling through her window, feeling a mix of nerves and anticipation. This was not just another performance. It was the culmination of everything she had worked for, every late night spent practicing, every moment of doubt overcome, every time she had allowed herself to trust the music flowing from her heart. Today, the stage was larger, the audience more distinguished, and the stakes higher than anything she had faced before. She dressed carefully, choosing clothes that were elegant but simple, nothing to distract from the music she intended to share. She carried with her the quiet confidence she had built over months of growth, the knowledge that her music was not just sound, but expression, connection, and truth. She walked through the streets to the venue, the city alive around her but distant, as if the world had narrowed to the stage ahead, the piano waiting, and the music that only she could create. The hall was massive, filled with rows of seats that stretched as far back as she could see. Lights shimmered softly, reflecting off polished wood and gleaming surfaces. Behind the stage, she could hear the murmurs of the audience as they settled, and the quiet hum of anticipation that always preceded a great performance. She took a deep breath, feeling her heart race, her fingers tingling with the familiar mix of nerves and excitement. This was the moment she had been preparing for, the moment that would define not just her career, but her understanding of herself as a musician. When the announcement was made, she walked to the piano with calm steps, though inside her chest her heart felt alive in a way she had never experienced before. She settled on the bench, feeling the smoothness of the keys beneath her fingers, and closed her eyes for a moment. She allowed herself to feel everything: the months of preparation, the encouragement of mentors, the admiration of audiences past, and the quiet promise she had made to herself to always play honestly and with courage. The first notes she played were soft, almost hesitant, a gentle whisper in the vast hall. She allowed the melody to grow naturally, letting her emotions guide her fingers. Slowly, the music began to take shape, each note building on the last, forming a story that only she could tell. The audience listened, captivated by the unfolding performance, their attention absolute. She could feel their energy, their quiet fascination, feeding back into her playing, giving her strength and inspiration. The piece grew, rising and falling, gentle in some moments and strong in others. She let herself be fully immersed in the music, no longer thinking about judgment, expectation, or recognition. She played because she had to, because the music demanded it, because it was the truest expression of herself she could offer. Each chord carried emotion, each pause spoke volumes, and each movement of her hands told a story beyond words. As she played, she noticed the subtle reactions in the audience. Some leaned forward, their eyes wide with awe. Others closed their eyes, letting the music wash over them and stir memories, emotions, and dreams. A few dabbed at the corners of their eyes, moved by the depth of feeling in her playing. Even critics, known for their sharp judgment, seemed unable to look away, caught in the power of the music. She realized then that she was not just performing. She was communicating, connecting, and sharing something profoundly human. Time seemed to stretch and bend as the music carried on. She played with a mixture of strength and delicacy, technical skill and raw emotion, creating a journey that moved from quiet reflection to soaring passion. Her fingers danced over the keys, sometimes gentle, sometimes urgent, always truthful. She felt the energy of the audience merge with her own, creating a sense of unity, of shared experience, that made the hall feel alive in a way she had never imagined. At one point, she allowed herself a moment of vulnerability, a soft passage that carried all the doubts, fears, and uncertainties she had experienced along her journey. It was a private truth made public, a reflection of every challenge she had overcome. The audience responded with quiet attention, as if honoring her courage, their silence a testament to the honesty of her expression. She felt a wave of emotion herself, a mixture of relief, pride, and quiet joy. She was doing exactly what she had set out to do. Play from her heart and share that truth with the world. The music began to build again, rising in intensity, flowing with power and confidence. She had reached the point where skill and emotion were one, where the music felt unstoppable yet natural. She could feel every note, every chord, every pause resonating through the hall, reaching the farthest corners and touching everyone present. She felt free, alive, and entirely herself. As the final passages approached, she allowed the melody to soar, each note carrying the culmination of her journey. She thought of the nights spent practicing alone, of the encouragement she had received, of the moments of doubt she had overcome. She thought of the people who had believed in her, and the strangers who had been moved by her music. She realized that all of it had led to this moment, and she let the music reflect that truth, that gratitude, that triumph. The last chord resonated through the hall, lingering in the air like a soft echo of emotion. She let her hands rest gently on the keys, closing her eyes as the silence stretched. And then the applause began. It started softly, polite and measured, but quickly grew into a thunderous wave of clapping, cheers, and admiration. People rose to their feet, some shouting words of praise, others simply clapping with unrestrained enthusiasm. She allowed herself a small, humble smile, feeling the full weight of the moment, the culmination of her hard work, her courage, and her honesty. Mentors, musicians, and even critics approached her afterward, their faces filled with admiration and respect. They praised her technique, her emotion, her ability to communicate so profoundly through music. One of the mentors, an older pianist with a gentle voice, said softly, "You have done something extraordinary. Not only have you mastered your skill, but you have given voice to your heart in a way that moves people. That is a gift. Never forget it." She nodded, feeling tears prick her eyes. "Thank you," she said quietly. I played what I felt. "And that," he replied, smiling, "is why it was unforgettable." After the performance, she found herself surrounded by people who wanted to know her, to work with her, to support her journey. Invitations to perform, opportunities to collaborate, and offers of mentorship came pouring in. She felt a mixture of excitement and humility, knowing that while doors were opening, it was still her own courage and honesty that had brought her here. The recognition she received was not just for skill, it was for truth, for the ability to share something human, beautiful, and profound. Walking home later that night, she felt a quiet sense of completeness. The city was calm, the streets bathed in the soft glow of streetlights, and the distant hum of traffic was like a gentle reminder of life continuing around her. She reflected on the journey she had taken, from the hesitant first notes she had played in a small hall to this moment of triumph and recognition. She realized that every step, every challenge, every moment of doubt had been necessary to bring her here, and she felt a deep sense of gratitude for all of it. Back in her apartment, she sat at the piano once more. This time, there was no audience, no expectation, no pressure, just her and the music. She allowed herself to play freely, exploring new melodies, improvising, and discovering notes and rhythms she had never imagined. The keys felt alive beneath her fingers, a partner in creation, a reflection of her own emotions and experiences. She played with joy, with courage, and with the quiet confidence of someone who had found their voice and knew it mattered. That night, as she finally prepared for sleep, she reflected on what she had learned. Talent alone was not enough. Recognition, opportunity, and applause were wonderful, but they were not the essence of music. The essence was honesty, courage, and the willingness to share something deeply personal with the world. When she played from that place, the world could hear her, and she could touch hearts, inspire minds, and create moments that would linger long after the final note faded. She understood that her journey was only beginning. There would be more performances, more challenges, more moments of doubt and triumph. But she felt ready. She had discovered the power of her own voice, the importance of courage, and the beauty of honest expression. And she knew that no matter what the future held, she would always play from her heart, letting the music carry her, guide her, and connect her to others in ways words never could. As she closed her eyes and drifted into sleep, the memory of the final performance lingered, a quiet reminder of the journey she had taken, the obstacles she had overcome, and the dreams she had yet to fulfill. She felt peace, hope, and a deep sense of purpose. Her music was her voice, her gift, and her way of sharing herself with the world. And she knew, with a quiet certainty, that this was only the beginning of a life filled with melody, passion, and extraordinary moments yet to come.